Hello everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about the movie Dances with the Wolves, and it came out in I believe 1990. It was actually starred in, directed, and produced by a man named Kevin Costner, and the story centers on Lieutenant John Dunbar, Costner's character, who's a Union soldier during the Civil War, and ends up out west somewhere in I believe like South Dakota area. He's all by himself at a military post, and from there he goes on this kind of personal journey. It's kind of really like I'll define like as a soul searching one, and eventually comes across the Lakota, I believe it's pronounced like Sioux tribe. Slowly begins to bond with them, and one of those big moments in the film is when he earns the name Dances with Wolves. After being seen playing with a wolf, he names Two Socks, and it's really a turning point in the movie that it shows how deeply he's starting to connect with their world. And along the way throughout the movie, he falls in love with a woman from the tribe, who I believe her name is Stands with a Fist, and the two get married. And what's really interesting is how he starts letting go of who he was before, this soldier, this outsider, and becomes someone totally different, someone who's part of the tribe now. And honestly, the film does something really meaningful. For a long time, Native Americans were often portrayed negatively in Hollywood, but this is what the Wolves kind of does the opposite of that, and instead highlights emotion, depth, and even beauty within their culture, and it really brings out their humanity. And this shift ties into the theme of nationalist myth, which we've been talking about this week. We've read about it and we heard about it in the lecture, and basically how myths can reflect or shape a nation's identity. And this film does that for the Lakota Sioux and for Native American communities more broadly. By showing them not as caricatures, but as real complex people. It gives space for their culture to be admired. Now let's look at how it really connects to some of the theories that we've discussed, and specifically Theodore H. Gaster and Clyde Cluckham. And starting with Gaster, he was a biblical scholar, born in England, and he believed that myths do more than just explain rituals. To him, myths, bring meaning to those rituals, lifting them from something ordinary to something that's more like spiritual. And he said that myth helps turn, these real life moments into something more ideal, something timeless. And in his book called Thespis, he outlines this four-stage ritual drama, which includes mortification, purgation, invigoration, and jubilation. And if you think about it, Dances with Wolves actually follows, kind of that same pattern. So first we have mortification, that's like a symbolic death or separation. And in the film, Dunbar tries to take his own life during a battlefield scene early on, and it's a low point, right? We see him, he's losing his identity and purpose, as a soldier. And then comes that other aspect, purgation, which is all about cleansing and reflection. Dunbar keeps a journal, and you see him slowly letting go of his old self. And it's also when he starts connecting with the Lakota Sioux, and of course that includes his friendship with the wolf, Two Socks. And it's a gradual, purification through these new meaningful experiences. And the third stage is an invigoration or initiation, sorry. And kind of this is where Dunbar really steps into that new role. He helps the tribe during a buffalo hunt, offers his skills, and even starts learning their language. He's eventually adopted into that community, and is given his new name. And finally, there's jubilation, which is his feeling of belonging or being reborn. And when he marries Stands with a Fist and finds peace and community with the tribe, he's not just surviving anymore. He's living. He's becoming someone entirely new. Someone with a new identity. And Gaster's framework fits this movie, so well. Dunbar's transformation is more than just a character arc. It's a ritual journey, one that changes, one that changes his soul. And now let's bring in Clyde Cluckham. He was an American anthropologist, and he believed that myths and rituals can exist on their own, but they often overlap. He also came up, kind of with this framework that it's called the values orientation theory, which is kind of basically a way to look at the values that shape different cultures, and it includes 5 areas: human nature, man-nature relationships, time, activity, and social relations. And so, how does this relate to Dances with the Wolves? Well, let's go ahead and break it down. First, we have human nature. The film really contrasts two cultural viewpoints, that of the Euro Americans and the Lakota Sioux, At first, Dunbar is part of the Euro-American side, fighting in the war, carrying those assumptions. But over time, he experiences life with the Lakota Sioux, and then ends up embracing their perspective and way of life. Next is the man-nature relationship. Euro-Americans in the film are shown to dominate and destroy. Think about how they kill buffalo for sport. But the Lakota Sioux respect the land and the animals, and even when they hunt, it's done with gratitude and care. And Dunbar kind of sees both sides and begins to understand just how differently, they each treat the natural world. And then there's time, when the Euro-Americans' mindset is very, I'll describe it as very future focused, and they're all about expanding westward, pushing boundaries. And this idea of manifest destiny, but the Lakota Sioux are more rooted in the present and their past. They have a strong connection to their ancestor and the land's sacredness. And, that fourth value is activity. For these Euro-Americans, activity is more about like achieving, conquering, spreading, gaining power. But it's way different for the Lakota Sioux. Activity is more about connection, building relationships, going through, those cultural rites of passage. And Dunbar learns that fulfillment comes from not just winning or expanding, but more from belonging, from being part of something greater than himself. The fifth value, social relations. Euro-Americans, especially in the military, are very rank-based, hierarchical. But in Lakota Sioux community society, things are more communal. Everyone contributes, and no one is placed above the group. There's a shared sense of responsibility and support that Dunbar becomes part of. Cluckomp's theory helps us, see just how deeply different these two worldviews are. And through the film, we see how Dunbar slowly adopts, that Lakota Sioux values, how he doesn't just join the tribe, but actually lives by their, their philosophy. And this shift is more than it's not just being symbolic, and it's a real shift. And Dunbar doesn't just get a new name, he earns it. He becomes Dances with Wolves in every way that matters. Now the filmmaking itself really helps support, these ideas. The cinematography uses wide sweeping shots of in the movie of the plains and sky. And this shows how important the land is, not just as a backdrop, but as something alive and sacred, to the tribe. And the music is also key. You hear like these flutes and drums in certain scenes that reflect, that Lakota culture. And sometimes the film uses silence, just all you hear, you don't hear anything. It's just pure stillness to capture, the peace and calm of the nature that is untouched or unharmed. And when you put all of this together, you get a film that really embodies the idea of nationalist myth. And it gives us a new lens to see Native American life, especially the Lakota Sioux, in a positive, respectful, even beautiful way. And it does so through Dunbar's eyes as he transforms. He transforms from an outsider to someone who belongs. In the beginning, of the movie, because you see he was a man, ready to die in battle. But by the end of the movie, he's chosen, a path with life, love and peace. And that transformation is all thanks to the Lakota Sioux. And so thank you all so much for listening. I really appreciate your time.